Hello guys and gals, and this is going to be a reading of Guinevere. This is going to be part 1, and it's by Sharan Newman. Actually what we're going to do is we are going to completely get rid of the original one I made. Actually, we're not going to completely get rid of it, it's just, I'm not going to use it. Basically, the inner cover here has what I thought was a synopsis, but it's someone's review, and it gave away a lot of plot points. So what we're going to do is we're just going to do an old Thanos snap. And it's gone. Actually, it's not. It's going to stay on YouTube, but nobody's ever going to watch it. Unless they have, like, the link. And, we're starting fresh. Also, I'm going to go over the copyright information, of course. This is by Sharan Newman. And this is a large print version. Now, it says here, copyright 1981. And I got permission from the author to read this on my YouTube channel. Much appreciated. Very much appreciation to the author for allowing me to do that. I will say that this whole series is still available for sale if you want to buy it. This is actually part of a trilogy. The second book is... Oh, this is Guinevere, by the way. Guinevere. The second one is the Chessboard Queen. And I'm hoping that's right. It'll be right in the description. And third is Guinevere Evermore. But anyways, with all that out of the way, we will start our reading here. Okay. Chapter 1. There was a sound in the night. The child woke suddenly, clutching the blankets. Someone was calling her. She was sure. Was it coming then, the time they never mentioned? Were the Saxons invading, even now, crashing down the gates, crushing her mother's flowers with their ugly setted boots? Why else would anyone wake her in the middle of the night? She held her breath, straining to hear. The still moonlight poured between the slats excuse me, in her shuttered window. A shadow passed, blocking the light for an instant. She bit the rough blanket to keep from crying out. It was only the guard, steadily pacing his watch from house to wall and back. Slowly her body relaxed. If the guard was still on duty, she had no cause for alarm. There were no screams, no clashes of sword or shield. Oh, sword and shield. Nothing but the moonlight and the muted slap of the guard's sandals as he passed the window. There was no surprise attack, no invasion. But then, who had called her? It had been so insistent, so urgent. Fear had made her thirsty. She slid from her bed and tiptoed over to the pitcher on her dressing table across the room. Her bare feet caught a little on the tiles of the mosaic on the floor. In the semi-dark, the pattern was only a series of blobs, but by daylight it was a great floral wreath with animals playing in the center around a giant tree. She loved it and stopped to pat with her toe the blob she knew was a fat baby rabbit. The picture was somewhat childish for her now, since she was past 12, but she had slept in that room since babyhood, and the mosaic was as familiar and comforting to her as the face of her nurse. Though the spring night was chilly, the floor was warm from the hot water pipes that ran beneath it. She reached the table and fumbled about for her cup. Her hand brushed against a pot of herbs, and it crashed to the floor. In the midnight quiet, the sound of the breaking pot seemed to echo through the house. Before the child had time to recover, a shape appeared at the door. An old woman wrapped in a blanket. "Lady Guinevere." The girl jumped guiltily. "What are you doing out of bed?" Startling the entire household from their sleep. "I woke up, Flora, and wanted some water. And look at this mess." Flora stooped and gathered up the shards of the pot. "Dirt everywhere. And my poor rosemary plant." "I'm sorry." Guinevere felt on the floor for the pieces. She stepped on the plant and a pungent aroma filled the room. "I didn't see it in the dark." That's why you should stay in bed in the dark instead of roaming around. There, we'll clean up the rest in the morning. Here's your water. Now hop right back into bed. I don't want to hear a peep out of you until well after sunrise." So Guinevere sipped her water and climbed back into bed. Flora bustled about pulling up the blankets and tucked it in with a strange, soothing noise people make to quiet, sleepy children. Then she slipped out and down the hallway to her own room. Guinevere lay awake for a while. Now she had two mysteries. Who had wakened her, and why under her blanket was Flora dressed in gold and scarlet robes? There were no answers. She listened for a time, but heard nothing more. Finally, she rolled onto her side, her hands crossed under her chin, fast asleep. When she next awoke, the sun was sending bright ribbons of light into the room. Motes were dancing through them, settling on her bed. Still, she had only a vague memory of waking in the night. A subtle feeling of disquiet. The sense that someone had called her was still strong. Who or what could it have been? She lay in bed a few minutes considering the clatter of the household preparing for the day's work intruded on her thoughts and cleared away her uneasy feeling. It must have been only a dream. The morning was bright, and she suddenly remembered that her father had promised her a special treat today, to take her riding, just the two of them. She got up quickly, and the last vestige of her worry gone. Guinevere's mother, Gwendolyn, sat at her dressing table. She was watching her husband, Leodegrus, putting on his riding clothes. She shook her head with disapproval. "You are spoiling the child, my dear," she told him. "You have too many other duties to waste an entire morning out riding with your daughter." Leodegrus grimaced as he pulled the lacings more tightly on his boots. "I promised her we would go riding today. She is bored here, now that her brothers are gone. She needs the exercise, and so do I." "You are bored now that her brothers are gone," she retorted. "You won't admit how much you miss them. They say the Saxons have sent over 100 boats this spring to bolster their forces here, and the Irish raids on the west are getting more frequent." She wasn't thinking of Guinevere then, but of her 3 sons all fighting together against the Saxon incursion in the north. "My cousin Cador is a fine general, Gwendolyn. We could not have entrusted our boys to anyone better. Would you rather we had run away like the others?" "Don't taunt me with that," Gwendolyn said, annoyed. "I have never been one to counsel flight. We have stayed and built and rebuilt our home when everyone else fled. Did I ever suggest that we would be happier or safer in Armorica? Britain is our home, and I will live to see it Roman again. What else have we fought all these years for? Why else have we raised our sons to be warriors? Can't you allow me at least the luxury of worrying like a mother? I fear for them, and Guinevere too, but I am not a coward any more than you." Leodegrus came to her, laughing at her indignation. "If only we could set you against the Saxons, my love. I'm sure they would abandon their huts and return to their own land in terror." She relaxed and smiled ruefully. "After all these years, you still enjoy teasing me. After all these years, you still respond so quickly to teasing." He kissed her, still laughing. "Now I'm going to spoil our daughter." They were interrupted by a maid with the information that a messenger had come with news from Lord Cador. They both forgot the quarrel and hurried out to meet him. Guinevere had finished washing and was dressing by the time Flora came for her. The older woman looked tired as she laid out the brushes and combs to arrange Guinevere's hair. Guinevere was making a point these days of showing Flora that she no longer needed a nurse to supervise her washing and dressing, but her mother said that a lady always needed a maid to attend to her hair, so she submitted to having it brushed and scented and braided into 2 long golden chains. "Some might say that this is Saxon hair," Flora would often croon, "but don't you believe them, my love. Their color is like old straw, left too long in the sun, but yours is true gold, burnished like a shield, red in the firelight. I could weave you a crown of it, and you could find no better." Guinevere hardly listened. She was accustomed to her hair being a source of wonder to those around her. She rarely thought about it, except when she had to have it washed or when it came undone and caught on branches while she was riding. She never even wondered why she should look so different from her family. Her parents and brothers were all dark of hair and eyes. Just to them, she seemed a sort of changeling, a radiant gift. She didn't even have the Roman nose they were all so proud of, although there was still time for one to develop. But Guinevere wasn't of an age to care. She knew only that she was safe and loved, and that was all it should be. Even though she had gone with her family to the mountain refuges, she had never felt danger. Her existence was protected, and she had kept apart from the rest of and she was kept apart from the rest of society. Only occasionally did rumors of Saxons or tales of great battles and warriors enter her life, and then only as stories told and sung by wandering scholars. She didn't know that their quiet, ordered, civilized way of life was already an anachronism. For 100 years, no true Roman citizen had lived in Britain, but her parents and their few remaining friends and relatives behaved as if the emperor would return any day, leading fresh legions to reinstate Roman rule. These were not important concerns of Guinevere. Caesar and Saxons were equally distant to her. Already she had forgotten her. Oops. This book has seen better days. It's been on my shelf for a while. Fear in the night. It was high May, a glorious morning, as she was going riding with her father. Her joy at this rare treat was only slightly dimmed by the fact that she would first have to spend an hour in the chapel for prayers, and then two more with her tutor. There was always a lot to look at during prayers, and she had finally talked old Tenmonetius into closing Cicero for the summer, and letting her read Ovid. The Metamorphosis was almost as full of spring as the day outside. She hummed happily as she crossed the garden to the little family chapel. At the door, she carefully smoothed her robe and arranged her veil so that it covered her hair and fell across her forehead. The stone building was far older than the others in the complex, and it had been there when the Romans came. Guinevere's great-great-grandfather had found it, and the hot spring hidden in a cavern nearby. He had painted over the crude drawings of horses and men on the building's walls, and tiled the floor with a mosaic of Apollo. Later, when the family had converted to Christianity, some of the tiles were removed, and fish and the Greek letters Cho, Rho added, as well as a nimbus about the god's head, making him into the image of Christ. The hot spring was farther inside the hill now, but it still provided the water for the heating pipes and the baths. The rest of the household had already gathered around the altar. Leodegrus and Gwendolen insisted that all the house and stable servants attend morning and evening prayers. There was also some young men and women who were being fostered into the house, and Guinevere's parents were very serious about their religious training. Flora always stood between the family and the rest of the servants. Guinevere thought it was her way of telling them that she was almost a member of the family. But today she noticed that Flora didn't exactly face the altar, but turned more to the west as if she were worshipping at some other shrine. Gwendolen gently nudged her, and she returned to her prayers. As she had hoped, the lesson for that day was not hard. Tenmonetius was preoccupied with a letter that he had received purporting to be an exact copy of a newly discovered epistle of St. Paul. It was all in Greek, a language the copier didn't speak, and Tenmonetius was spending all his waking hours and most of his dreams trying to decipher the badly written letters. He barely listened as Guinevere progressed from the age of gold to the iniquities of the Iron Age. He didn't even stop her for one of his lectures on the derivation of the proper names, so Guinevere enjoyed the story without interruption until Tenmonetius signaled that she might leave. As soon as she was released, she rushed to her room and began to pull on her riding shoes, leather slippers attached to thick leather thongs, which were wrapped around wads of cloth reaching up to her knees. She tied them carefully so that there was no space at her ankle between the leather and the cloth. Then she hurried to find her father. The air in the courtyard was still. The sunlight streamed in between the branches of the fruit trees or bounced off the dusty white walls. The rays were brilliant and seemed thick enough to hold The only movement was that of the motes in the light, slowly twirling, spinning down. The only sound was the slap-flop of Guinevere's shoes on the stone walk. At first she didn't notice the strange silence, then she stopped. She was almost to the stable gate, and still there was no noise. She was vaguely annoyed. "Where is everyone?" she muttered. "Have they forgotten that I was to ride today?" She stamped her foot. "Very well, I'll just follow them myself." The horses were all still in their stalls. The stable seemed deserted too. Guinevere felt that someone was watching her. She swung around and saw the outline of someone standing in the shadows behind the open gate. She stared and then realized that it was only Kate, the stable boy. "Kate, you frightened me," she reproached him. Where is my father? Where are the guards and the men-at-arms? Don't they know I am to go riding today?" Kate stepped into the light, but the shadows seemed to come with him. He was truly one of the old people, not Celtic or Roman or Saxon, but one who might have sprung from the earth itself. His hair was dark, sooty brown, and his eyes gray. He was small, hardly taller than Guinevere, although he was 4 or 5 years older. He rarely spoke and therefore was considered simple by the garrulous families who lived in the area. His ancestors had been slaves for 300 years. Leodegrus had freed his parents, and he had been born free, but only in name, and he knew it. Guinevere had played with him when she was small. He had made her toys and steadied her when she first learned to ride, and she was very fond of him in her unthinking way. She knew he wasn't simple, but had never bothered to find out more about him. If she had paid attention, he would have given himself away many times. Even now, he was staring at her so intently that it made her nervous. "Kate, please go and find my father for me," she smiled politely. "Tell him that I am waiting for him, and I'm not letting anyone leave without me." Kate bowed and left. Soon after, she heard the clatter of many voices. She ran to Leodegrus as he approached and hugged her reproachfully. "Father, you have forgotten me." "Not at all, my love," he replied, but I can't take you with me today. A message has come from our cousin Cador, and I will spend a few days riding to the villas of the other landholders to consult with them. Now don't be disappointed. There's nothing we can do about it. Come to your mother, and perhaps we can think of something else you can do today." Guinevere didn't complain, but she wasn't happy. He had promised to take her out. She didn't understand how anything could be that urgent. He could start out tomorrow. Nevertheless, she trod obediently beside him, as he thought lovingly of his docile daughter. Gwendolyn smiled at the pouting face. "I think it would be good for you to get out in the sun today, even if you can't ride. I was going to send the maids out to the meadow near the forest and gather herbs and wildflowers to dry for winter posets. You and Flora may go with them." Guinevere looked at her imploringly. It seemed a poor change from galloping freely through the woods with one's father to primly picking flowers in a meadow with one's nurse. Still, it was better than nothing. They were so careful about letting her go out of the compound alone these days. So a short time later, Guinevere and Flora went with the maids, and foster girls went off across the field. They were dressed in light, loose robes with their arms bare and only a narrow fillet around their waists. The girls were laughing and swinging their baskets, for this was a holiday to them. Although she wanted to run with the others, at least Guinevere followed with Flora. "You stay with me, my dove," the old woman ordered. "I am too old to trot around like that, and I need your strong shoulder to help me." Guinevere laughed at that. "Why, Flora, you can run faster than any of them. I've seen you. The time I fell from the walnut tree, you were across the court so quickly that you almost caught me. And when you found that Kate had pulled hair from Sybil's tail to make me a ring, why, you chased him completely around the house and caught him, even though he had a good start of you." Flora's lined face grew sharp. "Are you making fun of your old nurse?" There was a warning in her voice that Guinevere knew well. "No, Flora," she answered meekly, although there was a teasing look in her eye. "Would you like to lean on me for a while?" For a bit. and Flora rested her arm heavily on the girl's shoulder, causing her to stagger, but Guinevere set her teeth and bore it. Sometimes Flora could be very aggravating. Soon they came to the meadow. Tall, scented grasses and flowers covered a series of small hills at the western edge of it. With no prelude, the forest began. It was as if someone purposefully kept the area clear, as if the forest was not allowed to encroach on that spot. The flowers waved blue, white, red, and yellow in the warm sun, and the young women happily began to gather them. They flitted through the grasses, singing and laughing, and then finally sat on a little mound near the center of the meadow to sort the blooms and buds and tie them in bunches, gossiping all the while. The long-forgotten queen, buried beneath them, would have smiled to see their pleasure and rejoiced that the world had changed so little. Flora spread her shawl in the shade the shade of a large oak tree and sat down to rest. She looked very tired, and Guinevere noticed the silver glinting in her hair. With a pang of remorse, perhaps the long walk had really wearied her. "Now, my dear," the nurse told her, "you may walk a little into the woods, if you like, or stay with the serving girls and other ladies. But if you go, be sure to stay to the path and don't walk more than 100 steps in. The sun doesn't reach very far into the forest, and it's easy to lose your direction. I will rest a while, since I was robbed of my sleep last night. Now take your basket and your cape, and bring me back something beautiful and rare." Delighted, Guinevere gave her an apologetic kiss and skipped into the woods. Flora leaned her head wearily against the tree. She was getting old, she thought, too old to be leading a double life. The forest started so suddenly that within a few steps it surrounded Guinevere. From the brilliant sun-drenched field, she found herself in a cool, green, opaque light. The path was soft with centuries of pine needles and spring rain. Here grew the tiny, shy flowers that Guinevere loved best, lily of the valley and star flowers. Others were delicate shades of red and lavender with clear yellow veins in their fragile petals. She had no name for these, which made them all the more remarkable and mysterious. She knelt so that her face was next to them and brushed one with her cheek. "I cannot pick you," she told it softly. "I tried once to take you home to Mother, but you crumpled and died in my hand. Stay here where you are, fresh and beautiful. I will find something else for Flora." And gently she left the little flower, safe among the ferns. Deep among the leaves, dark blue eyes shone approval. Guinevere wandered here and there through the trees. She didn't even pretend to stay on the path, for she was sure she could find it again. She went far more than 100 steps because she had long since forgotten to count them. She was intensely happy. She was alone, a wonderful event in itself, and there was something rare and beautiful to be found. The sunlight scattered itself about her in such giddy patterns that she hardly noticed its slow downward slant. It was late afternoon, and she was far into the forest when a sound in the bushes startled her into awareness. Flora will be furious, was her first thought. She piled together the herbs and flowers she had picked, along with a few smooth stones and other curious things she had found. They were dumped randomly into her basket. A wild perfume arose as the stones crushed the plants. She stared about her as if she expected the path to appear at her feet. It was then that she realized how far she had wandered. "I've lost myself. How stupid." Guinevere was not overly concerned, for in her whole life she had never had a difficulty that someone hadn't quickly helped her out of. Being lost in the forest with night approaching wasn't any worse than climbing too high in the walnut tree or having a horse run away with one. Someone had climbed up and carried her down, and someone had raced after her and calmed the horse. Someone would soon come and find her. She wrapped her cape around her shoulders and composed herself to wait. After about 15 minutes, it occurred to her that she might just as well walk a bit towards home and help those hunting for her. After an hour of walking, she began to wonder if she had missed them somewhere. A little later, she noticed that the shadows under the trees were getting longer and darker. "If they don't come soon," she reasoned, "it will be dark, and they will have a lot of trouble finding me. She began to feel a whisper of concern then, as shreds of tales about forests at night came back to her. As a small child, she had been warned that ghosts and monsters walked the woods after dark, hunting for children to carry away to the underworld to be slaves. Gwendolyn had informed her daughter that they were Christians and civilized Romans. That they were Christians and civilized Romans, and didn't believe in such nonsense. In matters of that sort, Guinevere always trusted her mother over Flora. However, the dimming light made strange shapes among the trees and undergrowth. From the corner of her eye, Guinevere saw huge scaly hands reaching out for her. When she turned to face them, they vanished into the shadows. She wasn't panicky yet, but nervous. She found what looked like a narrow path and stumbled onto it. Tree roots rose from it, and stones that were eager to trip her or bruise her feet. The twilight above her head was deepening to night, and a few pale stars glittered. She was beginning to give way to fear, stumbling, her dress ripped from encounters with branches, her hair dusted with bark and cobwebs. She sank down, tears starting. Suddenly a light shone before her. It was somewhere behind the bushes, a silver gleam. It couldn't be a lantern or torch, but perhaps a reflection of one off a shield. Guinevere plunged towards it, paying no attention to the stones and grasping branches. As she came to where she had seen it shining, the light moved on. Gasping with exertion, she tried to call out, "Here I am! Wait! I'm just behind you! Please stop! Wait for me!" It was still moving away, becoming only a dim glow in the dark. She ran faster. "Soldiers of Leodegrus! It is I, Guinevere!" Still, the light moved away from her. On and on it went, always just too far away to be clearly seen. She was not aware of time or the forest about her, only the ache in her side and the dryness of her throat and the silver shining before her. Suddenly the light vanished. Guinevere gave a deep sobbing cry and dove through the thick strand of berry bushes where she had seen it last. Scratched and bleeding, she tumbled onto the main path, not far from where she had entered the forest that afternoon. As she lay there panting and coughing, her body numb with exhaustion and relief, she noticed something shining on a branch above her. Curious, she pulled herself part way up and crawled over to it. It was a long, thin strand of something silver. Guinevere couldn't tell whether it was reflecting the moonlight or if it gave off a light of its own. She reached up and gently pulled it down. It wasn't thread or wire. It was too thick for hair and too fine to be anything else, she thought. Then, in spite of her pain and weariness, Guinevere smiled. "Something rare and lovely," she almost laughed. "Now I shall have a gift for Flora." She started to put it in her basket, and she realized that she had dropped it long ago. So she sat in the middle of the path, resting, passing the thin, silky light between her fingers. We're going to have to stop it here. We will pick this up at a later date. I'm going to put a bookmark in there. We have been reading this wonderful fantasy novel, historically told. We've been reading Guinevere by Sharan Newman, a very good book, and it is an honor to read. Anyways, I got some unicorns. I only have a few, and then for some reason Spyro's over there too. So, anyways, if you like this content, make sure you like and subscribe and ring the bell so you know when I upload. And if you want to support me in any way, all that information will be in the description below. As always, thanks for watching, everyone, and have a great day.